Good morning, everybody. Well, today we're going to continue with our purchase agreement, right? So in the past couple of days, we've been talking about the buyer representation agreement, which was the BRBC, and there was a shortcut form, the PSRA, the property showing representation agreement, right? Remember, the difference is one, PSRA is limited to 3 properties and 30 days, and it's non-exclusive. The BRBC is up to 90 days or up to 3 months, unlimited properties as long as you describe some features of the property they're looking for, including price range, maybe bedrooms and bath, maybe square footage, and of course the cities and counties, right? And with the BRBC, you have the option to make it exclusive by checking A2, right? So make sure you review the BRBC and make it exclusive. Now, yesterday we talked about the listing agreement, the residential listing agreement. Again, it's pretty easy to complete. There's 2 commissions there that you need to make sure that you complete, specifically your commission as the listing agent, the seller's broker, right? Now, we have to attach on page 2 the addendum to residential listing agreement, which basically says if the seller wants to offer any compensation to any buyer's agent, right? My suggestion is that you put a number there and the seller agree to a number. What if you end up double ending it as a dual agent? What would be your fee? Okay, so please review those training recordings from, just check my emails later today and any succeeding training. And always check our Team Intero East Bay YouTube channel for any further training. Then you have the Moxie Hub also at Intero Corporate. All right, so today we're going to focus on the RPA, the Residential Purchase Agreement. So let me share my screen now, so that way you guys can see what we're doing. So now, you guys should see now my ZipForms, right? So today we're going to focus on the template, right? So on the templates, right, you should have a residential purchase and a residential listing, right? You should have both, right? It's up to you if you want to have other templates, right? Again, the purpose of the template is so you don't have to input certain information. So today we're going to focus on the residential purchase, okay? There are 3 main forms that you should have as of today. Oops, we won't do it. Let me get out of here real quick. Okay. Do you guys see my ZipForms or do you see a blank screen? What do you guys see on the screen?
Blank.
Right now, it's blank.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for letting me know. All right.
You're welcome.
All right. So now you guys should see my ZipForm shortly. Right. So we're on ZipForms, right? So this is where we begin. So we click on templates, right? So on your template, as I was saying earlier, you should have a residential purchase template and a listing template, okay? Because over 90% of the time, if not 100% of the time, we're doing residential properties. So on the residential purchase, there should be 3 main forms. As always, you should have a cover sheet, the purchase agreement, then you have the SPBB form, right? You got the buyer representation form and the PSRA, right? These are the main ones, right? But typically you have 3 main ones, which is the cover sheet, purchase agreement, and the SPBB, right? So that's what we're going to focus on today. We've already talked about the buyer representation and the PSRA. Now, there are some other forms, like the modification of terms for the buyer representation, and then there's the cancellation of the representation if you want, and some miscellaneous other forms, okay? You have the contingency removal, estimated buyer cost, which we're going to work on next week. And then, of course, just if we just review this later, you guys can figure out, what are these forms for, okay? For now, we're going to focus on the first 3. So if you look at the cover sheet, right? What do you need on the cover sheet, right? As I said, no buyer name, no seller name, right? As you can see here, there's a maximum of 2. I'll show you later how you can add more than 2 buyers or even 2 sellers if you need to. But typically, you have the 2 buyers and 2 sellers. Put an X on these boxes, and I'll show you where that shows up later. no property information, right? Because again, we do that in transactions, not template. Now on my template, I put a title company already because more than 50% of the time, my title company that or escrow company I'll put there, escrow and title is the same in Northern California. So it's gonna be Fidelity here. Okay. If you have a favorite one, put one in there or just leave it blank. Just make sure you have a reminder to put one later on and we'll show you where you put that. The most important thing you need to put in your cover sheet is the buyer broker information. On the listing side, you put the seller broker information because that's you. So please make sure you type this out so that way you don't have to redo it again. This is the power of using the the cover sheet, okay? After that, on the bottom, you'll see title information, same as escrow. Escrow and title is typically the same where we are. And then the last two things here is the disclosure information. This is your natural hazard disclosure company. I use Disclosure Source. You can use JCP or whatever company that you want, or you can just put, to follow, to be determined later, right? Or, just you put buyer's choice even, right? And then of course the home warranty company. I will usually put Fidelity Home Warranty. It's up to you which one you want to put, right? Or you can leave it blank. Just make sure you put something later on. And you'll see when we do the transactions, all this information that's on my cover sheet will transfer to the transaction file, right? So of that, there's really nothing more. Now let's look at the purchase agreement, okay? Okay, so as we move forward, here's the actual RPA. So all contracts, BRBC, listing contract, and the purchase agreement always have an agency disclosure form, right? You guys see that? Please make sure you read it. This does not say who represents who. This says what are the duties of each agent depending on who they represent, okay? So make sure, as a seller's agent, buyer's agent is typically the same thing. There's just a couple little changes. And then of course, what happens if you represent both, right? What are your duties as a buyer agent and as a seller agent? And this is just a simple.
What's on the top, the checkbox? Just if you go on the top, if checked, the first line, if checked.
What does it say?
Yeah, if checked, this form is what does that mean?
Leasehold. If it's a rental, right?
Okay.
More than 1 year, okay? So if it's a rental or a lease option, something like that, okay? You never check that, okay? Because you're not doing any leases, right? Okay. And then of course, this is the actual civil code. You're welcome to read this. I've read it a couple times and it didn't really make sense. So please read it. It's there. Okay, that's the actual civil code. Okay, it makes sense because if you just follow, what does it actually says. Okay. All right. So here's the RPA. Right. This is the template. So no date, no property information, no buyer. Right. On the agency to be, always check on this side because more than 50% of the time it's single agency. Right. Another company, another agent represents the other side. I always represent the buyer, so that's why this information is already here. Okay. Besides that, right, the only thing you really need to add here is 30 days on closing. Put an X. Whenever there's a checkbox and then you put in something, that's what makes it apply. Okay. By you just putting 30 days, it may not mean that this applies. Okay. It should apply. So that's why you should always check the boxes, right? So within 3 days or 1 day, the next business day, right? The EMD is going to be wired, right? So I'm going to have the escrow company call my buyer and work out the details of that wiring instructions, right? So that's what that is. That makes your offer stronger. As a listing agent, I don't want to wait 3 days, especially let's say we go into contract today. What is 3 business days from today? Not Monday, because it's not calendar days. It will be Wednesday. So basically the buyer has until Wednesday to bring in that money. Now they may need to have that time, but you want to make sure that the buyer already has that money, unless they need to liquidate some stocks, something like that, or they need to hit the lottery this weekend to get that EMD. I don't know, right? But typically, when you write an offer, you got to make sure that buyer has the money already for the EMD, yeah,
but
or at least know where to get it.
Go and deposit personally to the escrow company sometimes.
Yeah, they can. But they need to have a cashier's check, right? They don't accept personal check, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right. Okay. So after the first page, there's really nothing more. Remember those X on the cover sheet, right? These are the green ones for the buyer, sellers, right? So there's only 2 here. Okay. again, if you have more buyers, you're going to create check boxes or initial boxes here using your digital signing software. All right, on the second page, right, the top talks about any credits back to the buyer from the seller for closing costs or anything like that. G3, right? This is technically item 3G3, talks about our SPBB form, where we're asking the seller to pay us based on our BRBC, right? So SPBB will need to be completed, and it's a very simple form. You just put your commission that you want there, which we'll review later. And then, of course, it's your option if you want to include the first page of your BRBC. The listing agent may ask for it. I would suggest you guys attach it already, okay? Because that proves to the seller and the listing agent that that's what the buyer has signed, right? You can attach all 7 pages if you want, but typically the first page is enough for initially, right? Again, if you have to provide it, if they ask, you have to give it to them. All right, so everything else here, like H, it says that the buyer has the money and you've attached to the offer the proof. So we have bank statements that shows that you have the EMD and the additional down payment, right? If you don't, it's not liquid. You have to show, like, let's say, copies of where the money is coming from, right? If it's stocks, I need to see where the stocks are, right? So it could be a trading account. It could be from their 401k, right? Something that shows the value, okay? And the verification of loan up application, typically you have a pre-approval, and typically it's fully underwritten, right? So that should be always checked, right? Now it's up to you. I would say over 90% of the transaction I do, it's fully underwritten. So I'm okay putting it as a checkbox here, but you may just want to put at least a pre-approval on your template, right? For me, it's always fully underwritten, and then I can always uncheck it. You know, pre-qualification is not as strong, right? So the stronger you are, the better your offer is. Now, J, K, and L, I have certain days here that I want you guys to put as part of your template. You can always change this to make your offer stronger, or if you're removing loan contingency, see, check this out, okay? You don't do this on templates. You usually do this in transactions. If I check no loan contingency, the number of days disappear. I remove appraisal contingency, the days disappear, right? So again, it's up to you what you want to do, right? As a template, I'm keeping all contingencies, right? Even though I've checked here CRB attached, right? Because there are at least one contingency I will remove. Typically, it's the loan. Sometimes the appraisal. Sometimes it's the investigation, right? Which includes insurability, right? Remember, L4 is new. So L4 is now an insurance contingency that's spelled out. I've always been training you guys that is a contingency that you need to do it. But now, because of this insurance crisis, it's now part of our contract, okay? So you may remove all contingencies except for this one, because you don't know if you can get insurance or how much the insurance is going to be. So you're probably going to see more offers like that. Buyer removes all contingencies except the insurability or the insurance contingency, okay? And typically 7 days is enough. You know, sometimes maybe it's 3 days, right? So start shopping for insurance with your client. Typically, where you get the insurance, I always tell my clients, start with where you currently have car insurance, because typically everyone has car insurance, right? If not, we can refer a couple of people, such as the Interior Insurance company that we have, right? We're the only real estate company that have an insurance company attached to our firms, right? To where we have direct access to them. All right. So the others, so we see the documents, you can make these 3 or 1 day, it's up to you. Now, what if the seller has already prepared those disclosures and it's online already? So you can remove the contingencies. If you remove certain contingencies, right? Let's say I don't check this box, right? Let's pretend, and I have 10 here. But on my CR form, my contingency removal form, I check there, removes all contingencies. These dates don't matter anymore, because once the CR form is issued, those are the contingencies you're removing. So I don't care if you have contingencies here, okay? Once you send over the CR form with the appropriate contingency removals check, or which boxes you check, then these don't really matter anymore, okay? So that this CR form is the way you remove contingencies, no matter what it says on your contract, okay? So as a listing agent, please pay attention to that. As a buyer agent, please pay attention to it too, right? M talks about possession, right? You know, is there any rent back, things like that, right? Is the tenant occupied property? Make sure you get this TOPA form, right? Where the tenant is occupying, because it's different if it's seller occupied, you have the SIP or the RLAS, okay? So make sure you know which is applying. If it's a listing, if it's a tenant occupied, it's TOPA, okay? If it's not, if it's a seller renting back 29 days or less, SIP, 30 days or longer, it's the RLAS as it spells out here, okay? Now, as far as possession, I typically would want possession as a listing agent, right? Unless it's vacant, I usually will counter this to make it, you know, until 11:59 p.m. on date of recording. Remember, upon recording, which happens around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes it could be later, sometimes it could be earlier. Typically, when it records, it is now the buyer's property. In California, it's a time of recording. It's when it becomes when the transfer of ownership happens. Okay. Now, sometimes it can be reversed. Okay. Recording happens at 1 o'clock, but because the lender does something or fraud happens, the escrow company can actually reverse the recording. Okay. That's why you have title insurance. Okay. To protect the buyer's money. Now, giving it till 6 p.m. is fine. As a buyer agent, I typically would want the keys no later than 1 p.m. or 3 p.m. Okay, so I would tell you guys to just leave it at 6 p.m. is good. You know, so again, this is a negotiable item. Okay, on N, keep these at 1 days. Okay, guys. Okay, it's very important. So please read this because this tells the seller, hey, you got maximum 1 day to give me all these things or get these things done. Okay, for instance, the seller delivery of documents. I want it as soon as possible, right? This includes the disclosures. Now, what if it's online? Then they've met the timeline, right? Ordering HOA docs, right? Or installing smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, right? I want that done within 1 day of after acceptance. And again, these are typically done already, so I'm not really worried about it, right? Now, on page 3, P1 is very important. There's 3 things you should always check: stove, dishwasher, and the bathroom mirrors, right? You need to address these things, especially bathroom mirrors. Sometimes the bathroom mirrors are not owned by the seller, it's owned by the staging company. So make sure you read item 9 on the succeeding pages to understand what is included and what is excluded and how it's dealt with, okay? And then if there's anything excluded, like a chandelier that the seller is going to remove, you know, you need to put it in the exclusion and then figure out what's going to happen. Is the seller supposed to put in a new one or not, right? Like, for instance, like the washer, dryer, refrigerator, right? Are those excluded, right? Things like that.
So light fixtures and blinds, we can add items included, light
Okay.
fixtures and blinds.
Yes. And typically, if you read number 9, if it's attached, those are included, right? Now, curtains, are they attached? Well, the brackets are, but technically sometimes some curtains are, you just slide it off, right? So, but again, one is attached to the other, so therefore it is included. So anything attached and anything attached to that attachment is included. So make sure you guys read number 9, okay? So as we talk more about in the future training, make sure you guys really understand number 9, okay? As far as allocation of costs, these are where the other things come in, right? If you look at it, there are certain things here. Disclosure source, NHD, seller pays for that typically, right? And then all the other things is whatever is negotiable to you. You can see fidelity title has already transferred. Typically, where I write the offer, the buyer usually pays for the title insurance and escrow fee, okay? All right, so again, please review this and then, you know, ask your questions, okay? So this is what's standard. So in your buyer-seller guides, there's typically a list of customary closing costs. Again, that's customary. It's not what happens in the transaction. It's not set by law. It's whatever's negotiated in the contracts. So if a buyer writes an offer and they don't ask the seller to pay for anything, it is assumed that the buyer pays for it, no matter what the customary is, okay? So it's just like going out to dinner, right? Man, you know, man and woman, who pays for dinner? You got customary, right? And what actually happens? Until someone takes responsibility, someone is responsible. So if you're taking someone out to dinner and neither of you, right, picks up the check, who pays for it? Anybody? right? So like, on some areas, you don't check anything, right? Neither buyer or seller pays, right? So who pays for it? Right? Answer, guys. Who pays for dinner?
Buyer.
No,
If
Buyer.
it's not
no,
checked, then it's buyer.
right? In this case, if it's not checked, buyer pays for it, right? But if we're going out to dinner, right? I ask Dulat to dinner, right? I asked him out to dinner, right? He doesn't pick up the check. I don't pick up the check. So who's gonna pay for it? Question, huh? Who's gonna pay for
50-50.
dinner, Dulat?
50-50.
Right? Is it 50-50? No,
Yep.
whoever invites it, right? So in this case, whoever writes the offer, right? That's who pays. Okay. So, all right. So in this case, it is a buyer pay. So just make sure you understand that, right? So that was just an analogy I wanted to share. Okay. As far as other things, right? City transfer tax, county, right? Seller, these are all customary, but you can make it, have the buyer pay or seller pay, like home warranty, seller pays, right? So after this, other terms, this is where you want to add anything like, Ferrari in the garage to be included, to be given to buyer agent, right? You can put whatever you want on the additional, on other terms, right? And again, all these lines, you can keep typing. And if you happen to run out of lines, then you will get a text overflow form. Okay. So if you don't know what that means, keep typing on something and see what happens. All right. Dulat, question?
Yeah. So in the template,
Yes.
we have to pick up these 3 forms in the offer. They'll not attach themselves on their own.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So make sure you guys, okay, so let's quickly show you guys again what it is, right? So on the very first page, just do the agency part, the second part of it, 30-day close of escrow on 3B, and then 1 day on 3D for the EMD, right? Everything else can be filled out when you're writing the offering transactions, right?
Yes.
And then on page 2, right? Just remember, these dates. To me, that's the most important thing. And then, of course, this should always be checked now, right? G3 as part of your template. So that way it'll pick up the SPBB form. So there's the dates on
So
L.
that's also my question. It will pick up SPBB form
Yes,
automatically.
it will.
Yeah.
If you check that box.
Okay.
Okay. And then here are the other dates on N, right? And then on P, and then the different closing costs, right? And then, of course, the bottom half of it, if there's anything else, right? Now, on the 4th page, these are optional addendas you need or advisories. Like, for instance, is there probate? You can just get the probate addendum. There's the TOPA for 10 occupied properties. If it's a mobile home, you use the same form. Remember, this form is for residential 1 unit. Okay? So, mobile home is single unit. A probate property is single unit. REO property is single unit, right? So again, make sure you guys know which addendums you still need. So just take a look at it, okay? And then here you got the probate advisory, right? If it's a trust or if it's an REO, bank-owned property, right? Okay, remember, 1 unit or less, this is the one you want to make. There's no such thing as less, right? Because if it's less, it's a piece of land. There's another contract for land. So this is if it's 1 unit only, okay? Right? Because if it's more than 1 unit, it becomes multi-unit. So we have the residential income. Or if it's more than 4 units, we have the commercial property, okay? Which is similar to this, but it looks a little different, okay? So after this, starting at 5, this is where all the explanations of those grid system, right? It talks about increased deposit and all of that stuff, okay? It's gonna be up to you to read all that. So I'm gonna jump through the last page just in case, well, let me just go to the SPBB form, right? Okay, there are a lot of advisories now, okay? So let me see the SPBB, right? So at the SPBB, just make sure the top part is completed properly, right? The date of the contract, right? When you wrote the offer, buyer name, seller name, brokers, right? And the most important thing is here, the commission that you want, okay? Which is should be the same as your BRBC. Got it? So it is up to you what you put. I usually put 3. It's up to you what you want to put, okay? After that, buyer and seller signs, and we're done, okay? So pretty simple, your template, okay? I'm gonna stop my share here. All right, so creating your template is the first part, because if your template is done properly, you're 95% there, okay? So now let's actually write the offer, right? So let me do that, okay? share my screen again. Okay. Okay, so now I'm back to my dashboard, right? So now I'm going to go to transactions, right? Do you guys see my ZipForms now? Okay. But just in case you don't, I'm going to reset.
Yeah, we
And-
can see.
You guys see it? You guys see it? Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Let me again. Okay. So now I'm in my transaction file, right? Okay. So if I go to my docs, right, and I look at my cover sheet now, remember I'm in transactions now, right? So now what I need to do is input a buyer name and an email address. That's all I need. Okay, is an email address so I can DocuSign or e-sign, right, the property, right?
But before writing the transaction, you have to incorporate the
The
template.
forms.
Template.
Well, remember, I made my template a default, right? Right.
Okay.
So if you didn't default it, then you have to pick it. Okay. So after that, right? It's not necessary to put the seller name, but if you know what it is, you can put it in there, but it's not necessary to put the seller name, right? Of course, you don't have their email. So you can pull the tax record and pull out the name and just confirm it with the listing agent, okay? Because sometimes the people on title is not the actual sellers because it's a trust or it's a lawyer involved or someone died. So if it's probate, it's not going to be that, okay? I'm going to put the property information. Now, if I use the MLS input, right, and I'll show you that later, okay? I'll show you some shortcuts. I put in the purchase information, right? When I wrote the offer, how much the offer, what's my EMD, okay? I can put my loan amount here, total finance, 800,000 already, right? So there's a couple shortcuts I'll show you when we're done here. Fidelity, escrow there, my information. I don't need to put this, I need to find this information out, okay? On the cover sheet. If I don't put it here, then I have to retype it in all the other forms, okay? If I put on my cover sheet, anywhere it asks for this information, it'll be auto-populated, okay? Remember, Fidelity title is already there, disclosure source, and Fidelity home warranty. So that's my cover sheet, right? So now let's take a look at the RPA, right?
Greg, does the buyer needs to sign the cover sheet also?
No.
No.
The cover sheet is a guide. So no one
Oh.
needs to see this except your transaction coordinator.
Okay,
Right.
this doesn't need to be sent to the
Nope.
agent. Just okay, thank you.
Right. Okay, so here's the disclosure, right? So now there's only one buyer. So I will just check, I'll just double check. Now, if there was a second buyer, I would have put their second name and their name would have appeared and that would have reminded me to check the second box, right? In this case, there's only one buyer, one seller. So we'll follow that logic. So now if you look at the RPA, right? I typed that August 9th, right? Now I can put it here instead of my cover sheet, then it'll populate the cover sheet. Again, they talk to each other, right? So you can see here, the top part is already filled out, right? This auto populates, right? Where do I get that information? Typically on the MLS printout, right? Here's my purchase information, $1 million, 30 days, 3% deposit, 30,000, right? Deposit 1 day. Here's my loan amount, 80%, right? 20% down, maximum 7% interest rate. And it's up to you if you want to put a maximum interest rate. If you don't put a number there, then the buyer's going to accept whatever the best rate is. But to me, my buyer said, I can't afford anything above 7%. So that's what I put there. You got the rest of the loan amount, right? So they're putting 30 plus 170 equals 200. Purchase price, $1 million. Pretty simple, right? You now go to the second page, right? We're not asking for any credit. We are asking them to pay for that, for the buyer broker, right? So that's there. Basically, there's nothing new, right? If I decide I want to remove loan contingency, appraisal contingency, I can check these appropriate boxes, right? If I want to shorten this up, let's say the buyer doesn't want to do any more inspections or investigations. Remember, investigation is not just the inspection reports. Roof, property, termite, that's not the only ones. It's, do you know the crime rates? Are you curious about where your kids are going to go to school? Are you thinking of putting an ADU, adding more to the house? Do you want to investigate any of these things, right? So make sure the buyer understands what investigation is. This is not just inspections, right? Access, this is with regards to, does the buyer want to come back and take measurements, right? We want to leave this as 17. Some sellers will change this to like 0, right? I would be careful agreeing to something less, because basically that's when the buyer wants to come back to the house, right? To do measurements, bring contractors, things like that. Of course, whenever we come back to the property, we always make sure that the seller and listing agent knows, and we get their permission. Because remember, it's not the buyer's house yet, right? So we need to get their permission. Again, there's the other 777. It's up to you which one to do here. Please understand what these are. There are paragraphs that talks about it. Please make sure you understand it. I'm usually not putting anything here. Like I said, is the seller wanting a rent back? Then I address it here in M, okay? And as far as, possession, things like that. So there's really nothing more I really need to do, right? Except looking for completeness. Oh, is there an HOA? Then I need to put here, seller to pay for HOA transfer fees, right? Things like that. Oh, we want the washer dryer. So we check number 9, right? Up here on P, right? Well, we want the washer dryer refrigerator, right? Right? I can check that, right? Or whatever else. Remember, as far as the security equipment, right? If there is that the buyer wants, you can check it. But most of the time, if it's attached, it should already be included. But sometimes, the reason why this is spelled out here, or why things are spelled out on the contract, is because there's been lawsuit. There's been, for instance, security camera. It's hanging on the wall. Well, is it screwed on or is it taped on, right? Remember, if it's taped, that means it's not included. It's personal property. It's removable, right? But how do I know it's like screwed on, right? Well, when you're not sure of something, ask the buyer, did you want that? Mr. Seller, are you planning to leave that? You're planning to take it? Mr. Buyer, did you want that? Or should we ask the seller to leave it, right? What is it? Make sure you really understand number 9, because this is where the most lawsuits happen. Besides disclosure issues, it's about personal items. Either the buyer want it or don't want it. Either the seller planned to leave it or was taking it. We need to address that on item 9, okay? Letter P. So make sure you read that. Other than that, just make sure you read it. Reading the NHD is very important, because you need to know if you're in a wildfire zone, right? So after that, we're done, right? So what did we really do, right? Well, we just made sure, the up here, the property information is filled out with the buyer name, right? The loan information, right? What contingencies do we really want? And then the closing costs, right? So after that, we're done, okay? And now it's just a matter of double checking on SPBB, make sure our 3% is there, and then send it out for signatures and initials, right? So from here, we click save, right? And then we prepare for signing. So follow the steps after this, okay? We're not gonna do it here. Just review it, click on prepare signing. What documents do you want signed, right? So please practice that now. And if you have questions, please ask it the next time we do contracts again next week, and we can address it further. So now what I want to do is show you some quick shortcuts, and then we can, open up for Q&A, okay? So let me reset the screen so you guys see what I'm going to be looking at, okay? So here, so let's say now, Dulak kind of asked it earlier. Now I want to create a new transaction, right? Okay, let's look at this real quick. On my templates, okay? When you create a new template, right? Okay, when you create a new template, it's for residential, and you should check this box as automatically apply templates to purchase residential. This should have been checked when you created this template, okay? So that way it's already auto filled, right? But if it's not, that's okay, right? That's okay, right? So I'm just gonna cancel this out. So how do you make sure you did? So like this purchase, if I click on the arrow, the down arrow, right? And I look at template details, you guys see this, right? Template details. Now I
Yes.
can make it auto apply, right? Okay. I'm assuming you guys are seeing the template part, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now I want to create a new transaction. Let's just create a new transaction, right? So if I want to create a new transaction, just like a new template, I go to new, okay? New transaction. Let's say it's a purchase offer, right? Now, I would put the property address. Typically, this is the title, right? Sometimes, as you can see on my transaction, I have the buyer names because I have some buyers where we write multiple offers, right? So I just put, John Buyer, 123 Main, or some shortcut, right? Because this is your transaction name, okay? So I'm just gonna put, Dulat, right? Let's say Dulat's one of my investor or one of my buyers that I'm having to write more than one offer, right? So typically, I would put Dulat, and I'll put 123 Main, right? Okay. So that way it'll show up, right? So now on the property address, learn to use MLS Connect. So today I want you, if there is an MLS ID, MLS printout, I want you guys to click on MLS Connect. What that will do is you guys need to do this just once, right? Put in the MLS and then put in your agent information. It'll ask for it, okay? It's not asking for it because it's already set up for me. So click that MLS button. So that way, all you need to do is put the MLS ID, right? And then it will pull that information from the MLS if it's set up properly, and the property address will auto-populate, agent ID, and all those stuff. I would say over 95% of the important information on the MLS will come into this transaction file. Hit find. That's how you find it. If you cannot find it, then that means the MLS ID is wrong, right? So you just double check it. Make sure you know the actual MLS ID. So look at the MLS, there's an ID on it, okay? And then click on use listing and pop. It'll go in and you're done. All this information here will populate, or you can or if not, then you just have to type it individually. So click this MLS Connect, okay? And remember, the moment I hit residential, right? Look at what happens to my templates at the bottom, okay? Well, the moment I hit residential, okay, it would have pulled this template, the residential purchase contract template. It's already there. Now there might be others that shows up depending on your file, but typically it will pull up the template, okay, the purchase template. If this is blank, it's like, hey, how come you didn't pull it? Okay, then you click on my templates, and then you will find the template that you need to import. Okay, it's up to you which one you want to import. Okay, so all right, so that's how you would do it. Okay, now okay, so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover, right? So make sure you guys know how to create your templates, right? Again, there are different classes regarding the BRBC, how we did those templates, the listing agreement, how those templates. I'll upload this probably this weekend. So Monday's email will have all the most important templates, or excuse me, the most important recordings, the last recent ones. And then, of course, just go back to our Intero YouTube channel. There's a bunch of training over there. Please educate yourself. Bottom line is you just need to make sure that you read the forms so you understand it. Okay? So
Yes. Just one question again, sorry.
Okay.
So offer, I'll have RPA and
SPBB,
SPBB and
the BRBC.
BRBC.
Okay, perfect. All right, any question? Okay, how do you get this recording? Yes, you will get this shortly, or probably after. I'm busy today, so it'll be uploaded sometime this weekend. Look for my next email, everybody. Okay, you guys will get the recording. Okay, but if you really need it, like right this very moment, I can't do it because I got several things to do. So it'll be up this weekend for sure. Okay, on our YouTube channel, or you'll be on my next email, most likely by tomorrow morning. Okay, if not, by Monday morning for sure. Right. All right. So on Monday, we're going to do some more training regarding the buyer and seller net sheets. Okay. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to do a live class in the different offices, probably Union City or Fremont for Monday or Tuesday. If not, it'll definitely be on Zoom. Okay. For next week, all my classes are always on Zoom if you're not able to do the live. If I'm able to go do it live, it'll be on that email in the morning, typically around 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll know my schedule for the day. And then I'll tell you if some are live, but I'm always available live on Zoom, or you guys can always call me. All right. So let me hit the stop here.